Hello, and welcome to Power Platform PhD. I'm Alex, and this is the second video in our series about JSON and the Power Platform. Today, we're going to look specifically at the variables function and how we can use that to target our JSON and our Power Automates. Let's go to the desktop and see how we work this out. Okay, here we are at my desktop. So let's go ahead and look at the JSON object that we're going to use for this example. I've taken this from the first video that we had on JSON. The theme was Friday the 13th, Jason, haha. So let's see what we have here. So we have the movie title, year, serial killer. So we're using basically all the data types that you can use in JSON. So you have integers, strings, arrays, objects, etc., etc. Let me go ahead and copy this. Control C, and we're going to go ahead and move on to Power Automate. So we're going to create a flow, instant cloud flow, and we're going to call it variables test. And we're going to use a manual trigger and click on create. Let's move this up for some real estate. And then we're going to initialize a variable. So if you type in init, it should be in the first 5. Sometimes it's the third one, or this time it was the third one, so that's nice. And for some reason, it's not always the same one. So anyways, the main things about this initialize variable action is that you have to give it a name. So we're going to say var JSON, and we're going to make it a data type object and paste in our JSON object. Before we move on to the next action, let's go ahead and look at the Microsoft documentation on variables. And as you can see, variables will return the value for a specified variable. In our instance, we're using this var JSON, and so that variable will return the whole JSON object. There's also ways to traverse the object by using dot notation, which I will show you in a minute. But let's look at the documentation a little bit further. So you use the variables keyword, the name, and in between parentheses and single quotes, you use the variable name. And then in this instance, in this example on their documentation, if num items had the value 20, then the return would be 20. So let's go ahead and see how that works in our example. So in our example, we've just pasted in this JSON object of type object with the name of the variable var JSON. So I'm going to add another variable. We could use composes and a bunch of other ways to do this, but I'm going to stick with variables because I want to show you the importance of when you do use variables of the data type. So let's go ahead and do another init. Click on initialize variable. Don't really care too much about the name on this one, but let's say we want to target the year. So I'm going to go ahead and click on integer. We know it's an integer. If I go back and look at our JSON object over here, we know a year. It is not a string, it is an actual integer. So that does matter. If I said this was a string and then I called this, it would error. So now that we have the data type correctly, let's go ahead and target it. So we're going to use this fx, which stands for function expression. And I'm going to start typing variables. As soon as I hit V, you're going to see it at the top because there isn't a lot of keywords that start with V. So I'm going to select variables and start doing the open parentheses and single quotes. And then we know that the name of our variable that we're targeting is called var JSON. And we want to target the year. So how do you do that? Well, we use it in something called dot notation. So once you use the dot or the period, all these functions and properties that are available to you will show up. So these are the built-in ones that are given to you by Microsoft. The ones that you're targeting do not show up in IntelliSense. Maybe one day Microsoft will give us a workaround or a way to fix that. But right now, so once I start typing year, you're just going to get this day of year. I believe it's a property. I'm not sure if it's a function or not, but it doesn't matter because we're not targeting that anyways. We're actually trying to use year. And so where does this come from? Go back and look at our JSON object. It's this key. So we're targeting with the key year, and we hopefully get this value 1980. So now, with all that being said, don't forget to click on Add. So now we can see this as variables. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay, it's run, and as you can tell, we're on the last action, and of type integer, and the value returned is 1980. Don't mind the comma there. It's just the way Power Automate formats integers. Again, once you get this into a Power App or or however you want to do this, it'll come back as a raw string or a raw integer. And then you can also do formatting if you want it to be currency or whatever. So there's ways to deal with that, but this is just visual right now. If you were to pull this directly into Power or into Power Apps, it would just be 1980. Okay, let's target something else. So let's look at our JSON object. We have a couple of arrays here. So we have an array of weapons, which are just 4 string values. But I'd rather target this victims because it's a little bit more complex. It's an array of objects with 2 properties. So there's a name and method, name being the victim and the method that victim was killed by Pamela Voorhees. So before we get into that, when you want to target an array in Power Automate, you got to remember that it's 0 base. So this is 0. This is the 1 would be the second one. 2 would be the third one, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So let's go back and edit this. First of all, we have to remember that we need to make this an array. And now we're going to click on this again. Oops. It's an array. Click on FX. Type in variables for our JSON. And now we want to type in victims. Now I'm going to copy this and paste it for the next example because we're going to continue with this. So I'm going to say add and now test. Okay, so now it's returned, and as you can tell, it's come back with the value. So this is a data type array, and in the value, you can see all 5 objects that were returned. So if we want to target in this next one, we want to target Bill Brown with machete. So we want this one. Remember what I said about it being 0 base? So this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's go back and change that and target just that one. So how do you do that? So let's edit this again. Now, let's go back and look at this. This is not going to be an array anymore. This is going to be an object. So even though it's within an array, the actual return type is this object. So we need to change the type to object. Go back in here, hit FX, paste in what I had before. And to get to the specific one we're looking for, and we want the 4th one, that means we type in a 3 between brackets. So let's go ahead and add that and test that. Okay, now that that's ran, we can see that it is of type object, and we have returned this value. So Bill Brown and method machete. And again, we use 3 inside the brackets. And so 0, 1, 2, 3. That's correct. If we were to change it to a 2, then we would get Marcy Standler. So let's go one step further to go inside this object, but then now we want to say, let's get this one here, the method arrow. So this is the last element in the array, which would be the 4, the 4th element, or the 4 of the 5th value that's in there. So let's go ahead and click on this and edit. And this time we're pulling back a string. So we have to change this value again to a string. Click on value, click on FX. We're going to get the 4th one. And that property name is method. And I'm going to say add. Just to double check, we see it is named method. Okay, let's go ahead and test this one out. Okay, here we are. So clicking on this, you can now see that it's a string and the value is arrow. Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for watching this video on how to use the variables function expression to target JSON in Power Automate. I hope you like it. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Power Platform PhD.